What do we measure in a business and why? And how do we produce a breakthrough result in any business? Let's ask Marianne.
Good business practice involves measurement, and measurement on a number of fronts. And most good businesses practice with measuring some key benchmarks, and I'm going to go through 10 of them briefly in this little talk. It's very important for businesses to track their achievement and to track their achievement versus last year, versus the competition, and versus benchmarks. The first, probably when you think of measurement and business objectives, the first thing that you think of is sales revenue, and that is an important measure for businesses, obviously. It's measuring revenue and sales year to year, month to month, and versus the competition and versus industry benchmarks. So that's the first measure. And a good business also tracks sales changes relative to changes in advertising or changes in their marketing plan. So for example, if I've invested $100 in an advertising plan this month, I would like to see a significant increase in sales revenue. So the first measure is sales revenue. The second is customer loyalty and retention. And many businesses don't think of this, but measuring customer loyalty and retention is a key measure because it's very expensive to get a new customer, to attract a brand new customer. It's much more efficient and a much smarter business practice to focus on keeping the customers you have. So it's good business practice to measure loyalty, retention, and how many times existing customers come back. The third measure is cost of customer acquisition. And what that means is if it costs you $1,000 to acquire a new customer, for example, if you need to hire a new salesperson specifically to go visit that customer in order to garner an account, and it brings in $500, but it costs you $1,000, the cost of acquisition is too high relative to the value of that customer. So it's very important to track the cost of customer acquisition. That's the third. The fourth is the lifetime value of a customer. And what that means is over the life of this relationship between your customer and yourself, what value is that customer going to give you in terms of sales? Obviously, the higher the lifetime value, the more profitable and the more attractive that customer is. The fifth is operating productivity. And what that measure addresses is the productivity of your people. It's a measure that takes your sales and divides it by the number of people it takes to achieve those sales. So for example, if I was measuring sales force productivity, I would take my sales, divide it by my number of sales reps, and that would give me a productivity per sales rep, for example. And you can measure operational productivity on a number of measures depending on your business. So that's the first five, and I'm going to recap them because I went through them quickly. So the first five important metrics for a business are sales revenue, customer loyalty and retention, the cost of customer acquisition, customer lifetime value, and operating productivity. And those are the first five measures. The next five I'd like to talk to you about, the sixth is the size of the gross margin. And the gross margin is your sales minus the cost of sales. So it's your profit. It's typically referred to as profit. It's typically referred to as a percentage. And a lot of companies, especially small ones, get trapped in focusing on sales and forget to look at what it's costing them in terms of cost of goods sold. And you can sell a lot of product, a lot of stuff, but if you're not making a profit on that stuff, you're not going to get far ahead. So gross profit and gross margin is an important measure. The seventh measure that I ask companies to look at is monthly profit and loss. And that's more than just month-to-month sales. It's monthly profit and loss. And tracking this monthly helps businesses stay on top of things and stay on top of trends. The eighth important measure, overhead costs. And overhead costs are fixed costs, the costs of doing business that don't change with sales changes. So for example, if you are renting a factory and your rent is $1,000, your overhead is $1,000. That fixed cost is there whether you sell one single thing or not. That's very important to track and very easy to lose sight of for a small businessman. And that it can creep up on you very quickly if it's not tracked and benchmarked because those overhead costs have to be paid every month regardless of sales. So that's an important measure. The ninth and the second last measure are variable costs. And those are costs that go up and down with your sales. So if you're producing a product, it costs you so many dollars to produce it. And if you're not producing it, it doesn't cost you that. And that's your variable cost. And that has to be tracked. Tracked for a couple of reasons. Number one, to make sure that you are making a profit per unit. That's the bottom line for a business. And number two, to make sure that you're capitalizing on economies of scale. And that's a whole complicated topic, but what that means is the more you produce, each individual item should be costing you less. And if you don't track variable costs, you're not going to get a firm grasp on that. And the last measure that's important, particularly for a small business, is inventory. And inventory is one of the most important assets that a small business has. It's important to have an inventory so that you can meet your customers' needs when they need it. You need to have product when they want it, quickly, but you don't want to be sitting on a lot of product. So managing your inventory is a key indicator for small business. And that rounds off our top 10. So I'll repeat the last 6. The gross margin is number 6. Number 7 is monthly profit and loss. Number 8 is overhead costs. Number 9 is variable costs. And the final one is inventory size. Those 10 metrics are key benchmarks and measurements that I would expect every small business to monitor and track closely.